We're going to be taking a look today at a watch from Tempore Lux, which is a Spanish microbrand. The watch we're going to be looking at is the Racing One Chronograph, which is a 1960s motorsports racing inspired chronograph with my favorite movement, the ST19, or to be more precise, the ST1901. And as you can see, this is the watch here. This is the red colorway. There are actually 4 different color combinations. This one may have a few scratches as it's a prototype that's been passed around. And it also comes, by the way, on a choice of leather straps of this style. The colors vary depending upon the dial color. Or it comes with a really interesting kind of rollball metal bracelet where you've got holes in the bracelet like this, which is really cool. That's rather retro. I've seen those offered by 1 or 2 strap makers for about $80 each. So it's an interesting combination to get with this type of watch. So let's talk a little bit more about the history behind the brand, because I wasn't familiar with them until I saw them on Kickstarter. This is actually their 3rd Kickstarter campaign. Then we'll take a look at the watch and talk about pros and cons, pricing, that kind of a thing. This, although it has finished on Kickstarter, is still available on pre-order until the end of October 2021. So it's a very good time to review this. They did try sending me this watch prior to the Kickstarter campaign closing. I asked to review it because I thought it was really intriguing. And unfortunately, that kind of got stuck and it didn't get to me until some weeks after. So anyway, it's definitely worth spending time on this watch, as you know, if I didn't have a watch like this already, I would probably be quite interested in purchasing something of this style myself. I think one of the pricing options on this is still a good value while it's on pre-order, and definitely worth looking into. So we'll talk about the brand. I'm going to get this watch off my wrist, and I'll give you a full disclosure first. I have absolutely no involvement in this campaign. I have no means of profiting from it. I'm not getting to keep the watch. It must be returned once I've finished with it or passed on to the next reviewer. I run the Microbrand store. I run various watch groups. We are not carrying this in the Microbrand store. I don't have any business dealings with Temporary Lux. I thought they kind of didn't really get much exposure. Maybe they're not strong on the advertising kind of side of things. They might come up with some interesting watch designs, but it's half the battle is the design, the other half is marketing, to be honest, when you're running a small microbrand. And looking at the Kickstarter history, I just wanted to help out. So literally, there's nothing in this for me to gain. In fact, there's something in this for me to lose. I have my own watches that are running ST19 movements, such as this one here. I'm not going to spend any time on it, but just to give you an idea. So basically, this is in some ways even detrimental by pointing out another nice watch. But I always try and do the pros and cons of every watch that I look at, looking from a buyer's perspective. And I just wanted to paint a picture, so no skin in the game for me, and if anything, this is detrimental to me, but I want to share this because this watch, I think, deserves a good look. I think it's a gorgeous looking watch. So let's talk about the history and talk about the brand a little bit, and then we'll get into the watch features. So the person behind this brand is David Antonio Ramirez Jimenez. I probably mispronounced the name slightly because having no background in Spanish, I apologize if that's the case. This is his 3rd Kickstarter campaign, which is just this chronograph available in this kind of burgundy red, very nice soft sunburst. It's not a strong sunburst, but you really pick up on the kind of glow there as it moves around in the light. We're in indoor lighting here, but it's even nicer outdoors. So we have this color, a burgundy red. They have a sunburst blue, as you could probably guess. Though interestingly enough, that's with a the sunburst blue has a mix of white subdials and a black chapter ring, which I actually don't personally like the combination. I think they should have gone all white like they did here, but it's interesting because it's different, so that's going to appeal to some people. And they've got 2 white dial variants. There's a white dial with black subdials, a black chapter ring, so it's your typical traditional panda dial, which looks very nice on a black leather strap. And then they also have another white, and it's also a soft sunburst as well, another white one, but this time it's got blue, a dark blue, almost black, but very, very dark blue, maybe a navy blue perhaps, subdials and chapter ring, which is a very nice color combination as well. So definitely some nice options. So you've got 4 colorways on the dial. And you've got two choices of straps. The strap color will vary depending upon which dial color you go for. You have these leather straps, which are actually the more expensive option, with a kind of vintage style rally. And the interesting thing about these straps, I guess I'm getting into the specs a little bit, is that they're also from it's a Spanish microbrand, but these are handmade straps from a Spanish business that handmade straps, and I've had their straps before from another Spanish microbrand, Unity, and they're very good quality straps, Jacob straps. So I kind of like this a lot. The fact that you've got a lot of Spanish tie-in. For those of you that want to kind of go with a genuine microbrand, obviously they're not manufacturing themselves, but you'll see, we'll get into this a bit, you'll see that they're going to do the assembly in Spain, technically in Mallorca, which is part of Spain. And they're going to have that done by a master watchmaker with over 20 years experience, and each one's going to be regulated. So assembled in Spain. Obviously we're talking an ST19 or 1901 movement here, my favorite movement, but it is a Chinese movement, and we'll get into the pros and cons of that. It's actually more of a pro than a con from my perspective, because if you want to get a pure mechanical chronograph movement, and if you're not going to go for the ST19, you're probably going to be paying, even on Kickstarter pre-orders, over $800 for the next one up will be something like a Swiss Faljo 7750. So for something around the $500 price point or less, these ST19 movements, you can see them on Kickstarter $350 to $500, retail up to about $600 or so typically. Yeah, these are the only affordable option if you want to go pure mechanical. If you wish to go Mecha Quartz, which is just mechanical resets and mechanical push buttons, but everything else is really a quartz, then obviously you can go cheaper. But as far as a mechanical movement, because the plus in this movement is just, it's a gorgeous looking movement. Lots to see and do there. I mean, that's the money shot there. This is why so many people enjoy this movement. Really nice looking movement. I've enjoyed the backs of these watches more than the fronts often enough. So, sorry, jumping around. This is typical me. I just do my reviews in a single take. Don't plan it out, so you get it from the heart, what I'm feeling about a watch. But this watch has a lot going for it. So Spanish assembly, Spanish regulated, which means it's going to run accurately. And it's going to be assembled by somebody who knows what he's doing, so he'll probably strip clean the movement, assemble it. It should be smooth winding, last quite a while. So you have all of that. Spanish microbrand, Spanish handmade straps. Definitely the microbrand feels very authentic, as opposed to something slapped together in a Chinese factory and just somebody had an idea and had the factory design the watch. So that's a big plus for me as well. So this 1960s chronograph on Kickstarter is kind of interesting. I don't feel they did as well as they could. They had 63 backers. So they raised over 36,000 euros, which is today's exchange rate a little over 43,000 US dollars. Still pretty decent, and he's gone ahead and made the watches, but if you know anything about factories, you'll know a minimum production order size is going to be more than that. So he's needed to order more than he's sold on Kickstarter, and this is why we still have an ongoing pre-order, which will close at the end of October. And kudos to him for not, for doing that. Basically, he did have another Kickstarter campaign. His last one was July in 2019, so literally a couple of years ago, not even one since then. And that was a diver with also a chronograph option, but it had almost, well, not quite the same case. It had a generically similar case shape, but this one is far more refined, so it's really the next level. I mean, the lugs were kind of straighter. He's got really nice design features in this. Try and bring it up to the dial. It's probably got my dirty fingerprints all over it by now, but you can see you've got radial brushing on the top as opposed to a polished top. And then the rest of it is polished, which really accents the curves, plus my fingerprints. It is a bit of a fingerprint magnet on the side, but it's easy enough to clean. So you've got a really nice curved sides here, and as well as kind of curved down angle from the top here. So there's a lot of curves on this, and you've also got a very nice angular lugs. So it's an interesting watch. It's a 41mm diameter watch. So that sweet spot between the becoming more popular 40mm type sizes, again, seems to be the in thing, and 42mm used to be the go-to size for everyone. So I think it really hits the sweet spot. You need a little bit larger with a chronograph anyway, because you've got subdials, and here you have a fairly thick case bezel. So this is going to probably look a little bit chunky, but at the same time it's still going to fit quite well. I have a let's put this back on the wrist just for a few seconds. I didn't give you my wrist size here. I have exactly a 6.5 inch wrist that I believe is 19 centimeters. Used to be bigger, but for some time now I've been 6.5 inches, and that is wearing just beautifully for me. I wouldn't want to go too much smaller with this, but maybe 6 inch is probably the limit. And if I had a larger wrist, because it's somewhat chunky as well, I think it's still going to wear pretty well. So it should suit most medium wrist sizes for men. And it should suit that kind of very tough crossover spot, which is about 6.5 inches, where it's not quite a small man size. So it's not going to be your 38, 40 millimeter. But often I wear 42, it's my favorite size, and find I have to change the straps because on the innermost hole on the straps, the stock straps don't fit. But this one works pretty well. It did come with a butterfly clasp, which is nice. And then talking about the options, you have this rally style strap made by Jacob Leather. But the other option, I think this is really cool, because actually for some reason it's cheaper. I would have guessed it would be more expensive. With every one of these watches, you are going to get a if you go for the bracelet, you'll get a Rollball. That's it, Rollball style bracelet. And those are quite expensive if you get them from third-party vendors. You probably can't get them for under $80. At least I've not been able to find them cheaper than that. So for you to get that kind of old-fashioned style bracelet with this watch, if you're going for the watch, we'll talk about prices, I would recommend maybe getting the watch on the bracelet and then getting an aftermarket strap, or maybe you can buy this strap too if you want it. The colors on this is obviously a burgundy dial. I don't know how well it's picking it up in indoor light. This is almost a kind of dusty pink inner edging on the straps here, but it really works well with the watch. You do not want the same color. You want the dial to pop a little bit. It's a duller looking color. You get a brighter sunburst, very strong reds here in the office, and even more so outside in sunlight. It just works really well, and I'm really happy with the combination. I think this is a very comfortable strap, and it looks very thick, not too subtle, but it's supple. Sorry, but it is going to mold well to a curvature of a wrist or a watch cushion, and should last quite some time, which is important with your leather straps. A very well handmade strap. I don't think this is going to be shredding or anything like that anytime soon. So talking about the campaign, his very first campaign was 2018, and it's pretty much the same three-hand dive watch that he had in the second campaign, but that first campaign failed, but he stuck to his guns. Came back with improved design in 2019, which was the V1, which was a diver, and also had a chronograph version of the V1. And they kind of came in a case that was somewhat similar to this, but this is definitely major improvements all around. Better lugs, better curvature, better use of brushed and polished finishes, and so on. So he's kind of improved each iteration, and I think if he was to do another campaign, whenever it is, a year from now, you're going to see a slightly different design. And then there's a lot of attention to detail here. I mean, sure, you've got a very nice, strong 1960s vibe with the kind of rounded, squared subdials, the whole case shape. It's just gorgeous. So I'm loving the look of this watch. Let's get a little bit more. I think I mentioned the colors. I put some pictures up to give you an idea of some of the color choices there. So let's talk about the prices, then we'll get into the specs. So with the Rollball, I keep calling it Rollerball. I just liked that movie, sorry, when I was a kid. With Rollball style fitted bracelet, the cheapest option right now on pre-order is €429, which is $510. Now, before you kind of gasp and go, over $500, it's D19, not so sure about that. I did notice on his website, which I'll put a link up to that, it's temporarylux.com, there is a option if you sign up for the mailing list to get a 20% off. So I don't know if that applies to pre-orders, but I'm pretty sure as the only thing he's got going is his pre-order, it probably does. that if you were to take 20% off 429 euros, that's 343 euros and 20, is it cents in euros? I think it is. Which is about 410 US dollars. Now that is a pretty decent price. It's not a Kickstarter price, but it's a very decent price for a pre-order on a watch that's due to be produced soon. And you could obviously use something like PayPal, so you've got like a 6-month guarantee. So I think that is a decent price, especially with that Rollball bracelet, because I just cannot get those bracelets anywhere else. There's a strap site I like to go to, and I can't even spot one for under $80. They're pretty rare anyway. I think there's only 1 or 2 suppliers I've seen. So that to me is a good value. The recommended retail price, which you should always take with a pinch of salt, because I'm pretty sure these would not sell so well at the full retail price, was 599 euros, which is rather steep at 710 US dollars. And this is me just being candid in my reviews as always. And for 710 US dollars, you're kind of getting a little bit closer to that Swiss ETA/Valjo's 7750 price point. You're not quite there yet, but that's definitely very steep for an ST19 based chronograph. Sure, you can pick some up cheap ones somewhere like AliExpress or something like that, but to get ones from a decent Microbrand, I mean, even the ones that we've been selling are closer to the $500 price point, not the $700. So maybe he'll do well, because it is a pretty unique design, and really you can never put value on a design too much. If it's a outstanding design and people really want it, it's going to sell anyway, and design should really carry a premium. So it is a gorgeous looking watch. He has not cut any corners on it. With a handmade straps are not cheap. He's going to have to pay labor, not in China, but labor in Spain for these handmade straps, good quality straps. Again, you've got that rollball bracelet. So, so your money is definitely going somewhere, I feel. I mean, even the simple stuff, obviously you've got dome sapphire crystal on the top, but on the bottom he didn't cut any corners. That is also sapphire crystal as well. So nice looking watch. Really, you need to be the objective decider how much you want to pay for it. But it's a non-issue right now. If you get it on pre-order, I think the pricing is pretty decent. Personally, I would probably hold off on the retail pricing, but I have no problem with this pre-order pricing at all. And that 20% just kind of nails it for me. I would be definitely interested in this if I just didn't have several retro ST19 chronographs already, including some blue ones, and I'm also working on some other ones that you'll see in 2022. So would love to have this. It's a shame I've got to pass it on for the next reviewer, but for me, I'm going to pass on actually backing this one, just simply because I've got so many watches. It just gets a bit crazy sometimes, and I have to kind of make sure I have a happy marriage at least. So definitely don't want to go overboard on my watch purchases. So that's the pricing. Let's talk about the specs a little bit. It's a 41mm diameter. So I think, as I mentioned, that sweet spot between 40mm, the new in size, and 42mm, which was last year's in size. And then the lug-to-lug length, which is really what's going to count for whether it fits on your wrist. The diameter is just a general indication, is 49mm. The lug height, so not the lug width, sorry, not the lug length. I got this completely screwed up for you. That's what happens with a single take. So the lug-to-lug length is 49mm, which is what really works out whether it fits on your wrist or not. And then the lug width is 20mm. So I might have expected 22, but it kind of works. It works well with these straps, but you'll be using 20mm. That's still a fairly standard size. 20 and 22 are the most common sizes. So that's pretty cool as well. And the height is 14mm. Though having said that, even if it is 14, it does feel a bit chunkier because it's got straight up sides. But it fits on the wrist really nicely. Just feels a little bit chunkier on my wrist, just because of, looks I should say, because of the straight up case sides. The pusher action on this is great. So some case designs they kind of catch when you push them in, but it's been very crisp. The nice thing about this crown, it's really good grip. I have bad fingers. I don't tend to talk about it. You can probably see some nails here, very ugly. But basically, I also have arthritis and so on. Getting an old guy. Anyway, but I have a big fuss about whether I can grip something when I wind it, because I have a bad grip, and sometimes it depends which fingers are having an issue. I might have an issue with these fingers. So sounds rather petty, but for a hand wound movement, it can be critical that you have a good grip on the crown. So everything about this is, to me, highly functional. Oh, and there's one huge important fact I didn't really even talk about when we talked about pricing. And that's also talking about the ST90 movement. And there's some interesting history, but the important thing about the ST90 movement, I have heard other reviewers, one or two, say they've had some hit and miss experiences with ST90 movements. And I was thinking to myself, well, of course you did. You picked up some from AliExpress or just from a Microbrand that slapped them in. And the equivalent would be, let's say we're talking about Seiko NH35 movements. So a Seiko NH35 is a very affordable movement. Some people love that movement so much they prefer it over a Swiss ETA movement in their dive watches because it's ultra reliable. It's certainly not as accurate as an ETA movement, but it's extremely reliable and one of the go-to movements, long-lasting movements. However, you can get that slapped in a factory and it's not been lubricated and just badly assembled in a dirty workshop somewhere in some country. And picking it up on a super cheap watch somewhere off of some questionable website, not from a Microbrand particularly, but from a factory brand somewhere, for argument's sake, China, but I'm not particularly picking on China. And then you are going to have a movement that probably won't last more than a few months before it goes wrong or it just fails within a year. And the same is true of ST90 movements. So if you get one of these in a cheap factory watch that's just slapped in, it's hit or miss. Chronographs have a lot more going on with them. There's it's 5 hands as opposed to 3 and a lot more complicated stuff going on at the back. So there is more to go wrong. But if you get it assembled by somebody who's a good watchmaker, and this is the key, in a clean environment, who cleans it, strips it, lubricates it, reassembles it, and then regulates it to make it accurate. Maybe you get as lucky as 1 second per day or something like that. You're not always going to guarantee that. It could be like 5 or 6 seconds per day. Some of you could be 0 seconds per day, but you are going to have a really nice watch that could potentially last a long time. This is actually quite a reliable movement. I have sold watches from several Microbrands, Mercer, Vicaria, and a couple of others that have ST90 movements. The ones that have been regulated, all the Vicaria ones were. We didn't particularly have issues. We didn't have like a ton of returns, that kind of a thing. And because the watchmaker took care of things and made sure that they got a right movement. If you have good QA from any Microbrand, they'll check the movement before it gets assembled, or before the watch gets shipped to you after it's been assembled, as well as before assembling it. So good QA is key. Clean environment, somebody skilled knows what they're doing, installing it is key. And even if you go as far as regulating it and fine-tuning it, everything about this is really positive. And there's a value to that costs money. And I think if you calculate that into your price, and what we were talking about, $410 with that 20% discount, that to me is an excellent value. So I am happy with the pricing, worth talking about the movement. I already mentioned that really it's the only choice if you want to go full mechanical for under a much more expensive price. Your typical price point on a mechanical Val Joe is going to be, around about the $1,000 price point, maybe a pre-order $800 or $900, something like that. So definitely excellent value. Let's talk a little bit more about the ST90 movement, because I mentioned it's a Chinese movement. To be fair, the ST90 movement started life as a Swiss movement, the Venus 175. And my understanding is that Seagull in the 1960s also, bought the plans to the movement, blueprints, whatever you want to call them, bought the machinery also from Venus, and set up production, and then came up with actually a slightly more improved model. And then that one became really popular, the 1963 version that was used, for the Chinese Air Force. and then kind of reproductions of that have been selling a lot. People like to have those in their collection. But for the Microbrand market, it's just great because you've got this now more affordable movement coming out of China that basically has a lot of interesting history. I mean, not only does it look good, you've got the history going back decades. I think it's like even 1940s or so. That I don't know the full history of the Venus 175, but I know that it was acquired by Seagull in the 1960s or so. So it's just a really interesting retro movement. It's actually my favorite, as I mentioned, because it's hand wound, so you don't get a rotor on the back, so you can really enjoy the gorgeous exhibition case backs on these. But another reason I prefer this over specifically, people think I'm crazy, but I definitely prefer this, and almost with one or two exceptions, all my chronographs are now SD19s, my personal collection. And the reason I prefer this over the Valjo 7750, the more expensive, much more expensive Swiss movement, apart from the hand wound aspect, because I do enjoy looking at my mechanical movements, is how crisp the action is on the pushers. It's a column wheel chronograph, which means it's going to be a little, one of the issues with the Valjo is sometimes you can press it and it can be super stiff. These are crisp, they're not stiff, so they work pretty well. So that's another plus as well. So rest of the specs, before I forget, you've got the dimensions. I mentioned sapphire crystal, also with anti-reflective coating, of course. Indoor lighting, let's deliberately get the light in overhead on it somewhere. There it is. So you can see it's doing pretty well if I just aim the lights directly at it. It's obviously, I could white it out by doing direct over the top. But, imagine sunlight outdoors. I think it does pretty well with the anti-reflective coating there. 100 meters water resistance. So it's not a screw-down crown. So this is going to be basically kind of a field watch. You could wear it every day and not worry about it as an everyday watch, particularly with a Rollball bracelet. Leather straps like this might end up getting ruined if you got them wet in rain or whatever. But you could wear this as an everyday watch. It's a fairly robust movement. It is a hand-wound movement. Let's talk about the power reserve. And here we have a negative, not a strong negative. The power reserve claimed on this is 50 hours. Now, to be fair to Temporary Lux, many websites say 50 hours, particularly Chinese ones. I think one Chinese one even says 51 hours. But in general, when you look at the power reserve on these, you typically see on other websites, I think including Seagull, around 40 hours being reported as a minimum. And a number of retailers say 45 hours. So I think really what you can take away from this is you might get lucky and get up to 50, 51 hours. Probably not. It's guaranteed more than 40 hours. So it's the equivalent to your 38/44 hour Miyota 8s and 9s and Seiko NH35s, but it could be lasting longer. Obviously, it depends if you're going to use the chronograph function. We're just talking about the three-hand timekeeping function. If you are using the chronograph, it's going to probably last like 30 hours or something like that. So your power reserve, better than 40 and normal use, and you might get lucky and get 50 as claimed on the Temporary Lux website. Maybe they tested one or two and got lucky there, but I don't think that's the rule of thumb. I could be wrong. Jury's kind of out on that one, but definitely worth mentioning. The movement also only has a 30-minute timer on it for the chronograph. So obviously you've got the main sweep of the second hand at start the chronograph running actually nice and crisp. I don't think I've actually wound this recently, so hopefully it'll keep going. So you've got the main second chronograph here. This is just timekeeping hours and minutes. The minute counter is on the right subdial. If I bring this up and focus on it, there you go. So you can see it's a 30-minute subdial. And on the left side, you've just got a 60-second time of day counter. So it's a really nice movement. If I, very crisp stop-start. I just stopped it, just started it, stopped it, and a nice snap-back reset. Boom. There we go. So that's what I love about mechanical movements. And to be fair, you can get that kind of crisp feel on a Mecha quartz as well, but the whole timekeeping structure is going to be entirely quartz or electronic and not actually mechanical. whereas here you've got a 100% mechanical movement, and there is just no beating the backs of these watches in terms of enjoyment. Okay, one more comment I need to cover. Just want to make sure I get this point in. That's kind of an interesting conversation point, and maybe a question potentially to ask the brand. As you can see here, this is a prototype. The movement itself here in this prototype does not have a swan neck regulator. And there was some talk in the campaign on Kickstarter. I believe there was an update where they offer that as an option to Kickstarter backers. There is no mention of whether they're going to do that at all or not. No mention at all that I could find on the main website for pre-orders. So if you are interested in a swan neck regulator on the back of this watch, which I believe is possibly a €15 extra, talk to the Temporary Lux, via their website. Ask them, get that in writing. Make sure you understand the situation, because I genuinely don't know whether these will come with swan neck regulators. I anticipate that they don't. And I think a swan neck regulator is a great thing. Obviously, if you've got, say, a 2-year warranty on the watch, you're not going to open up the back of the watch and invalidate the warranty, and it's already regulated, so you don't technically need to worry. You even think about this for a couple of years. If you're going to keep your watch long term, it's probably going to, with Lux, stay fairly accurate, but for some reason, maybe it gets knocked around a bit or whatever, or you get it serviced, you get it back, it's not so accurate. Swan neck regulators, let's talk about those a little bit. So on the back of any watch that's an ST19, you kind of, if it's not got a swan neck regulator, it's got kind of a lever that sticks out like this, that you can kind of knock this way or knock this way with something very carefully, because you don't want to get what's underneath the lever, and to make it faster or slower, right? And the thing about knocking that, it's very it's not going to be loose. It's not easy to knot, because you don't want it moving around and adjusting the speed of your watch if the watch gets bumped. So you have to knock it carefully, and you have to, a little bit of pressure. And you could knock it just a little bit, and that could drastically increase or decrease the speed. So say you were starting at, I don't know, maybe 15 seconds per day accuracy, which is pretty typical for a non-regulated watch of this type. So you had 15 seconds accuracy on the watch, and you wanted to make it plus 15 per day, and you wanted to make it a little bit slower, so you knock it in the slow direction, and you find it at minus 10, so you knock it back in the faster direction, and now you're plus 20. It can be very frustrating, and if you don't have a time grapher to measure it right after you've made these adjustments, or while you're making the adjustments even, then you're going to be testing it for 2 or 3 days to see how it works out. Each time you knock it backwards and forwards, extremely frustrating. So the way a swan neck regulator works is you actually have a screw you can turn. And you could make a quarter turn, and that will make an adjustment to the spring length of less than a human hair width. Really fine adjustment, and it's consistent because you're turning a screw. And that means if you don't have your own time grapher, if you know it's running fast based upon how you wear the watch, you just turn it in the slow direction a certain amount. And you can just consistently increase or decrease that speed, so you can quickly get to where you need to be within a couple of days. Much easier to self-regulate if you don't mind opening the back of your watch. It's use the appropriate watch tool to unscrew the back. It's a screw down case back, and be careful about the 100 meters of water resistance with basically when you do that. But if you want to do this yourself, that is the advantage of a swan neck regulator. So here it's an interesting thing, because these watches are coming regulated. And you've also got a 2-year warranty, so you don't want to be opening the back and invalidating the warranty. So it's only really, I think, in this case for people who are looking to keep this watch really long term in their collection. They tend to keep watches for quite a few years. That is a nice thing to have. If you've got a time grapher, you probably have one if you have an extensive collection. You should get one if you don't. And you start collecting watches seriously, then maybe it's not strictly necessary, but it's still, it's a nice thing to have. €15 or $15 or whatever the price works out at, maybe that's $20 or less than 20, is not much to pay. I would definitely opt for that as an option. for some reason you're outside the warranty, it's going to make your life a little bit easier in my opinion. But if you know your way around adjusting and regulating watches, you won't need something like that with the right equipment, but it makes everyone else's life a little bit easier. So that's it from me, pretty much everything that I needed to cover. I did not give you any time grapher readings on this because this is a prototype that has not been regulated by the watchmaker in Spain. It's just come straight from a factory, so it's just like random factory settings, definitely not regulated. I can't remember what this was running at when I got it, maybe plus 20 or something. Nothing unusual, just stock factory watch. So giving you the values on that would be actually pretty useless if you're going to end up with a regulated timepiece. But anyway, very nice watch. I love this watch. I hope they do well in the remaining pre-orders. This is my favorite color, the burgundy. I also really like the kind of standard version that you get with, when I say standard version, sorry, I can't think of the right word, the panda dial, traditional panda dial, black and white on the black rally strap. Looks really nice, but again, I would get that kind of thing with a rollerball if you can't get both straps, because it's really easy to get a black aftermarket strap. If you're going to go for the red, this is a very nice strap to get. So it's just down to your personal preference. If you can maybe pay extra, get both the rollerball, sorry, I keep calling it rollerball, the rollball bracelet and the leather straps, that will be worthwhile in my opinion as well. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I know I tend to waffle a bit, but I really like the watch and I'm glad that I was able to give it a bit of an outing here, let other people enjoy this watch as well. For me, there's several values in a Microbrand. One is you get to know the people behind the brand, but I hate ubiquitous watches. I don't mean to pick on everyone's favorite brand, Rolex, but as an example, how many people do you know own a Rolex? I mean, you could buy a Rolex anywhere in the world. Sure, there's some rare Rolexes that are super expensive, but generally speaking, the nice thing about Microbrands, if I was to buy a watch like this and I go out, probably people I bump into don't even know the brand, they don't know anything about this. You're wearing something that maybe is a really small production run. I don't know how many he's making, but if he sold 63, I don't know if his minimum order quantity from the factory is going to be 100, 150, 300 is a pretty typical number. So it's kind of almost like a limited edition. I'm sure they can do maybe another production run. There's always that kind of a risk if it takes off. But typically these Microbrands are small, and you're wearing something that's extremely rare, probably rarer than most limited editions, with a bit of personal history where you can relate to the owner. Maybe you've even swapped emails with the owner asking questions about things like the Swan Net regulator. And you're helping a small business. It's not one of these behemoths that are just kind of international companies with a gazillion employees, kind of who really everything's just the numbers games with them. You're dealing with somebody who loves his timepieces, who has spent a lot of time working on getting this watch produced, a startup, if you will. And I really like that, and I think, there's one of the things that makes Microbrands so powerful. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Take care.